Hello everyone! Before we start with our next lecture, let's briefly summarize what we have learned so far. So far we have covered demand and supply. Let's just remind ourselves what these concepts mean. First of all, demand is the downward sloping line which shows that as price drops, quantity demanded will increase. This reflects the law of demand. If price of a particular product goes down, we move along the same demand curve, let's say from point A to point B, and as a result, quantity demanded will increase. People prefer to buy more items when price is lower. This is how consumers behave. Supply side of the market is represented by upward sloping supply curve. This reflects the law of supply, which tells us that as the price of a particular product goes up, producers are willing to supply more output to the market, and there will be a movement from point A to point B. When price is higher, suppliers are willing to sell more products because they're earning higher profit, and therefore they have high incentive to produce more products. Both demand and supply curves will shift due to other factors apart from the price. Whenever we have changes in the price for our particular product, for example, we are talking about market of potatoes. Market of potatoes. When price of potatoes changes, goes up or down, there will be a movement along the same demand and or supply curve, movement along the curve. When there will be changes in any other factor apart from the price of potatoes, demand and supply will shift. The main factors which will shift demand curve include consumer income, tastes or fashion trend, expectations, and prices of other goods, complements and substitutes of other goods. For example, when consumer income drops, consumers will be willing to purchase less products at each and every price. In other words, demand curve will shift to the left. When the product becomes fashionable, for example, consumers will be willing to purchase more. As a result, demand curve will shift to the right, and so on. We have covered this in our previous lecture. The main factors which will shift supply curve will include costs of production, technology, and government policy. This includes taxes and subsidies. And also expectations. Expectations will affect both demand and supply side of the market. With supply, it's quite easy to memorize what happens to supply curve, how these determinants of supply will shift the curve, because we can convert all these determinants into costs of production. Whenever costs go up, or whenever there will be any other factor which will increase the costs of production, supply curve will shift upwards, because suppliers will be willing to sell the same amount of units, the same number of units, for example, Q1, but at a higher price now. And this will be true for each and every price, for each and every quantity along the supply curve. In other words, supply curve will shift upwards. When technology improves, for example, this is likely to lead to lower costs of production. Producers will be able to produce the same quantity, but cheaper, quicker, faster, more efficiently, and as a result, they will be able to charge lower prices. So supply curve will shift downwards. So we have covered demand, movement along demand curve and shifts in the demand curve. We have covered supply and shifts in the supply curve. In this particular lecture, we are going to combine these both sides of the market together and study market equilibrium. Now, please proceed to the next lecture, market equilibrium.